Morning, Kat. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Very good. Welcome to the Talking Heads podcast. So, shall we get started by introducing you to the listeners? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and a little bit about your business?
Of course, thank you. So, my name is Cathryn Barnard, and I am a co founder at Working the Future. We are a Buckinghamshire based future of work advisory firm. So, what that means is that we advise organisations on the trends transforming work in the 2020s. We help with behaviour and culture change, and we work with organisations to introduce strategic workforce planning activities and interventions that build long-term resilience and agility into operating tactics.
An exciting time to be in your field of work. So, we had a great AGM and our back in November and our Future of Work Summit, and we talked lots about the trends that were transforming the workplace and the fact that we're living in a period of constant change. You know, the only thing that is constant now is change, with no likelihood that things will ever return fully to the way they were. So much has changed in the last 3 years, and we all know that this has had a profound impact on us all as human beings, actually. And we've seen the workplace reinvented at lightning speed, and the sort of employee experience is dramatically changing. Can you talk a little bit about the sort of the significant trends that you see transforming work at the moment?
Absolutely. I think, and I know we didn't really talk about this during the Future of Work Summit, purely because it is such a vast topic. We could be there all day, but I think, preceding, even well before the pandemic, I think most organisations were thinking about digital transformation, but not necessarily thinking about the impact of digital adoption on the way in which people work and the way in which organisations deliver products and services to their clients and stakeholders. And I think one of the things that it's hard to avoid is just the range of technology products that are coming online all day, every day. The size and scale of the investment by venture capitalists, private equity firms into the technology arena mean that effectively, as a business owner, you're constantly facing almost a tsunami of new possible products, digital products that your organization could deploy. And of course, while we're busy figuring out which tools, products, applications, which new software, whatever, to introduce to our businesses, that actually has a seismic consequence for the users of those technologies. And actually, one of the things that we notice a lot is that you introduce new platforms, applications, etc. But as users, we're constantly struggling to keep up with those technologies, probably only using about 10, maybe 20% of the range of functionality of those technologies. But it adds a level of stress to how we do things, because I think I probably speak for all of us. If you think about how often, even something like Microsoft is continuously bringing new features into its array of products and without ceremony. So you can flick open Teams and find that a whole bunch of stuff has changed, which sets you back like 15-20 minutes. You're having to figure out where things are and why the setup that you had yesterday isn't the same setup as you need today. And I think it slows people down. So while on the one hand, you know, the wide business narrative is keep up, digitally, I can't get my words out, digitally transform.
Yeah.
To keep up with competition in the marketplace. There's an internal cost to that, which is we as employees or workers or whatever, we're constantly experiencing a really low-lying level of stress as we try and adapt to new things. And there's I don't know what, there's a magazine, it's an online magazine now in the US called Wired, which was specifically set up to track and monitor evolving technology. And their founder and editor-in-chief, Kevin Kelly, has written, you know, we are now all perpetual newbies. We're always struggling to acquire a minimum viable level of competence. But I do think that unless we have open conversation about that one thing, you know, that's quite challenging for most of us, because nothing is ever the same.
But interesting, isn't it? Because it's also, it's a new world where it's okay to be imperfect at something, and the language around it. There can be no expectation that an individual is perfectly honed in the latest digital technology or the latest platform, because they are ever evolving. But actually the mindset of the individual probably needs to be, well, I'm just going to keep evolving with it. You do have to buy into the end result, that you know, do we all believe that it's going to make our lives easier? Because if it is, then obviously it's worth investing the time, and as you've just described, the stress or the pain of going through it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because it kind of comes back to, you know, the need for really crystal clear communication right across the organisation as to what it is we're actually here to achieve, what actually matters in the end. Presumably for every organisation, what actually matters is the delivery of a product or service to an audience who perceives that product or services as good/marvellous. You know, lackluster and mediocre is just not going to cut it. So the minimum viable service level must be good or more. But we need to be continuously communicating within our team settings as to what good looks like, so that those of us, and I think the prevailing cultural narrative that the internet projects onto us is it kind of drives a sense of perfectionism. But perfectionism is, you know, that's just a false ideal. We're never actually, to your point, going to get there. So what does good look like?
And I'm forever driving our team mad, because I'm open to watching what everybody else is doing, and then I'll come back and I'll say, oh, I've seen this. I can remember when I first saw the preview of other people being able, I was given access to somebody else's diary and I could see the slots that they had available, and I come trotting back to camp. I think that's great. Can we please have that? Because it'll make things so much more efficient, and it lets people choose their slots. And so I think it's a world in which we're constantly absorbing the art of the possible, and then, you know, looking at it and seeing whether it's viable for our organisation.
I think that is an accurate analysis of where we are at now, which is that we are all immersed in possibility all of the time, and actually what we are figuring out is that there's only so much time available in the day, and these great ideas, we have to pick and choose which of those possibilities are the most relevant for our organisation and our stakeholders, because we can't do everything. So that requires far more discernment than perhaps we've ever needed in the past. It's very easy to get caught up in fads and passing fancies. You think about, I read a data point not so long ago that the average lifespan of an app is something like 30 days, and that is purely because there are so many apps that get introduced, and the long tail of those, it's only a very, very tiny amount that actually prove resilient to time and culture change, but the rest, just come and go. And you think about the cost of developing an app, and you think about the time it takes to integrate an app into the way that you do things, and how long it takes for people to get used to using something. It's extraordinary, isn't it? So I think we do all need to be more discerning. And I think it was an interesting piece that I read last week about future of work strategies. Like, every single member of a team, of an organization now, instead of coming in to do a job and not necessarily needing to think too broadly about that role, that set of responsibilities within an environment that feeds into a bigger environment and a bigger environment, we all need to kind of up our game and see that the sea that we're swimming in order to make better decisions about what we're paying attention to.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy to feel overwhelmed by everything that's going on. I think you get presented with new technology. Will it work for our organisation? What we're going to get back in return for any investment of time or money that we put into it? And it reminds me an awful lot. I can remember when we first started doing social media. And I remember thinking there's an awful lot of resource having to go into social media. And actually, at the very beginning, what's the return on investment? What are we going to be getting out of it? And I think it's really important to have a bit of a strategy in terms of, like you say about the apps. We've looked at apps in our business several times and thought, well, is it something that our website can't do? If we drive people to, and it's this constant, we can't do everything. So for now, we're going to do this, this, and this, and then you just evolve. I think you do need a bit of a plan, because it can be very, very random otherwise, and there's too much of it.
And there's always going to be somebody telling you that you should be doing X, Y, or Z, but and I know these are a long time ago now, but if you think, do you remember back to the hype around Y2K? And oh my goodness, everything was going to fall apart unless we spent all this time and money protecting against year 2000 computing bugs. I have to say also, the amount of hype there was around GDPR in, when was that? 2018?
Yeah.
And actually the hype far outpaced the reality. And one of my reflections, and I'm not by any way downplaying the influence of Silicon Valley, but look at how much money is pumped into the PR machines of these technology companies and VC land and so on. And a lot of these technologies are unlikely to withstand the test of time. For every 10 investments made, the venture capitalists only actually see one of those organisations survive and thrive. That's an awful lot of mud.
It
to throw at the wall, isn't it? And I think we just have to be sensitive to that and try and employ pragmatism, and just not get carried away with the hype.
At the summit, Kat, you mentioned the shifting attitudes that folks now have towards work and towards their employment, and spoke a bit about flexibility, autonomy, and needing that sense of connection and inclusion. And when I reflected back on it, I thought, isn't that what employees, what workers have always wanted, but perhaps they didn't feel able to insist on it? So what's changing, or what's changed that this now elevates up to the place that it's at?
So I think you're right. I think we've always probably aspired to it, but perhaps haven't been consciously aware of it and able to articulate it. I think what's changed is the shape and nature of the UK labour market. Actually, we had several things happen in quite short succession. Wasn't it January 2020 that we formally ended our relationship with the European Union? So it was always going to be the case that some people who'd been working within the UK economy from outside of the UK decided that the conditions were no longer favourable for them to continue working in this country. So that was, and of course there were reports in the media of people, Europeans, saying that they had experienced hostility and, dare I say, racism after the departure of the UK from the European Union. So there were always going to be issues with that. Of course, then the pandemic happened, and to be stuck far, far away from friends, family and loved ones, and with no clear view of when you might be able to travel back home. If you think how long Australia, as one, for instance, had its travel bans in place, I know school friends who emigrated to Australia who weren't able to get home for parents' funerals because of those travel bans. And I think the pandemic awoke us, not everybody, but we certainly had a lot of time to think about the meaning of life and what we actually wanted from life and what we were prepared to accept and what we weren't prepared to accept. So we've got a slowly reducing size of labour market. I read some data the other week that said that effectively now, for all the movement that's still going on in terms of recruitment and new hiring, the labour market isn't actually growing anymore. And I think we pointed during the keynote to some data saying, outlining, it was ONS data, saying that the UK labour market has shrunk to the tune of 700,000 people, some of which have just stepped away and decided they no longer need to work because they're financially secure, and some of which haven't returned to the workplace because they're clinically vulnerable and there's the impact of long COVID. But the point is that in a shrinking, tighter labour market, we are no longer in an employer-led labour market. And it means that every single business needs to wake up to the new landscape and think as much about how you retain employees as how you retain clients and customers.
It's been really lovely talking to you, and I feel that there's several more conversations that we could have on this intriguing subject. But for now, conscious of time, because I know we do have to wrap up, if I pressed you for what you would consider to be the most important tidbit of advice that you would impart, as so many of us in business are trying to navigate these uncharted waters, what would it be?
I think that the sooner any business owner embraces the team around him or her and brings them into the conversation about the strategic direction of the organisation. You know, gone is the day, are the days when all the strategic decision making needed to happen behind closed doors. I think, you know, the most impactful difference that you can make at the moment is to invite your team into the thinking and the sense making around the direction of travel for your organisation. And if you think that through, you will always have a team of people who are in direct contact with your stakeholders, with your customers and your clients day in, day out. They will have the best intelligence about, you know, the mood in that room and what people want, what they're prepared to spend their money on, and so on. So having your team proactively involved in the strategic direction setting of the business, I think that's absolutely a priority. And taking the time to gather and chat with other people in your ecosystem to collectively sense make, because you can't do all of this on your own. It's impossible. And if you're not garnering that collective intelligence, I think the chances are you're probably shortening your lifespan, because you're just not going to be in full possession of the market intelligence that you need.
Okay, so to that end, it falls for me just to remind listeners that Buckinghamshire Business First is here to help you if you need us. We've got a team who can help you navigate that path ahead, and can connect you to some really inspirational people like Kat, and some inspirational thinking and that right support that you need. So we are a strong business community, and the businesses within it are very generous with their time, their experience and their expertise. So for now, thank you all for listening, and we hope to catch up with you again soon. Bye.